And it is a bright and sunny morning here in the Midwest as we move into October and all of the wonderful things the season brings, especially lovely things like apple cider. I'm having my apple cider today, fresh from the orchard. So how are things out west, Stephen? Are you guys getting apple cider?
Not yet, but that's a really great idea. It's pretty warm out still. I think we've got some warm days left, but we're expecting it to get colder by the end of this month. So it's looking good.
Yes, actually, I think we have a couple of days of warmer weather, and then midweek it plunges, and we'll be running around with our gotchkis on. And for those who don't know what gotchkis are, it's a Polish word for long underwear, that protective undergarment that you wear after the sun starts spending less and less time radiating its warmth into your little universe. So
that sounds really warm and comfortable. I was just thinking about how we might need some of those here as it gets colder.
Yeah, the thermal gotchkis now that come with these microfiber thingies that you don't retain the sweat, so you don't get cold. And it's fascinating how we're making life so very, very comfortable for our bodies. We're definitely committed to making our bodies happy at all time, and maybe sometimes that's not always to our advantage as we look more deeply into A Course in Miracles and realize that inclination to put all that attention and comfort seeking into a physical form that is really not who we actually are. It kind of sets us up for turning the body or the body mind, the mortal mind, into the plant Audrey 2 from the Little Shop of Horrors, where he's demanding, "Feed me, Seymour." He wants to suck every drop of blood out of you, and that perhaps is one of the problems with giving the ego what it thinks it wants.
Yeah, that's a great analogy, because he starts off with just one little drop of blood, right? And then he needs more and more and more, and it's just an insatiable appetite.
That's true.
So today we're starting up with lesson 50. And for all those watching, we're going to skip ahead after that to lesson 61, because we're going to skip over the review lessons. That's right.
That is correct. And pardon me, lesson 50 is very apropos for what we were just talking about. Feed me, Seymour, feed me.
Right. It says, "I am sustained by the love of God." So I'll read this first paragraph here. "Here is the answer to every problem that confronts you today and tomorrow and throughout time. In this world, you believe you are sustained by everything but God. Your faith is placed in the most trivial and insane symbols." Oh, I think we already went over this one last week, Chris.
Yes, I think you are right.
All right.
So we're going to do a 180 and zip over to lessons 61 through 67 then.
There we go. Perfect. So lesson 61 says, "I am the light of the world." And who is the light of the world except God's Son? This then is merely a statement of the truth about yourself. It is the opposite of a statement of pride, of arrogance, or of self-deception. It does not describe the self-concept you have made. It does not refer to any of the characteristics with which you have endowed your idols. It refers to you as you were created by God. It simply states the truth.
That's a very concise attack on the ego, even though it's not designed to be an attack, but the ego perceives it as an attack because the ego would have us humble ourselves to everything that comes into our sphere of consciousness. You know, we have to bow down to germs and all sorts of body ailments and social ailments, etc., etc. And when God created us, he created us in a state of perfection. So humility is not, at least in the sense of our identity, is definitely not a direction we want to go. But we do want to humble our ego, and that's where the differentiation occurs here. We do have to create a distinction between that humility that is unnatural for the truth of our identity, the Christ that we are. And yet, on the other side of the coin, the ego is so self-aggrandizing. The ego is so invested in it's all about me that we do have to give it a little constraint periodically through our journey through space and time here in the material world.
Absolutely. And that next statement says, to the ego, today's idea is the epitome of self-glorification. And so it twists it around, right? So it twists it so that you're saying, well, if you're saying I'm the light of the world, aren't you, isn't that arrogant of you to think about yourself? Is the ego's perception of it.
Well, because the ego is realizing that you're shifting your attention from this personal self that you've created to the true self that you actually are. And so the ego is definitely going to be inflamed with that recognition that, there is no flaw in you as you are truly created by God, but that sense of identity that you generated for yourself is riddled with flaws that are pretty much laughable.
And Glorian's here on the call with us. Want to see what she thinks of all this.
I just got here. I'm just listening. This is lesson 50 you guys are working with?
61.
71. Oh.
61, honey. We had to we left off at finishing 50 last week, so we skipped the reviews.
Cool. Okay. Hi.
So anyway, it says a little bit further down here, true humility requires that you accept today's idea because it is God's voice, which tells you it is true. That's kind of a nice jumping back and forth here, where it's saying, yes, you do have to have humility in that you have to humble your ego. You do have to listen to that voice of God, proclaiming your perfection, proclaiming your beauty. And that is a real rough proposition for most of us, because even though we may have this bravado on the surface, when we start to fall into that range of actually embracing that thought, embracing our beauty, embracing our joy, embracing our perfection, then we get very nervous around that. We tend to withdraw from that. We tend to reflect on the screw-ups last week and yesterday, and how you burned supper for your husband and all these other things that the ego is trying to convince you that you are a flawed being by bringing into your mind's eye. But here you have to, again, I repeat that idea, humble the ego, humble your lower self in order to be able to receive this kind of a dispensation from God, this kind of a vision or an image of self that God is trying to call back into your memory.
Absolutely. I just wanted to recall there was a time like around the time when we first met, and you said to me, you know, in regards to recording music, that to go ahead and post whatever with like the screw ups on there, you know. And I feel like what you were getting at was, you know, to be comfortable with that, to not, you know, invest your sense of self in like where you might have made so-called mistakes or failures. Is that along the line of thinking you were proposing?
That's part of it, yeah. There's also that aspect that our capacity to evaluate is very much hindered by our ego. And the Asian cultures especially put a lot of emphasis on that. So if you go to Japan, you will find that the Japanese have a reverence for flaws. A teapot that has been dropped and broken and then glued back together is more revered than a fresh teapot, because those flaws give it an additional essence of its own inherent perfection. So it's interesting how we like to make these generalized assumptions about what it is that we're doing and what it is that we have created. But when you don't place a judgment on the things you have created, you will discover that other people will point out the things that you imagine to have been flaws and say, oh, that's kind of quirky, that's really cool, that enhances things, that makes it better. So again, that whole process of judgment then comes up for us to have to stop and review, because every time we pass a judgment, all we do is take a step away from our own truth and limit ourselves in so many, many ways.
Yeah, I really like that. I'll keep that reminder with me for sure. And
that'll be easy. I'll send you a broken teapot and you can glue it back together.
Yeah, there's a little thing in the show we watched, Lorian, remember Once Upon a Time, and there's the teacup that's broken that reminds, in the story, there's like Beauty and the Beast kind of a kind of theme in it, and that the broken teapot or teacup reminds them of the love they share.
Exactly.
So
yeah,
I thought that was...
I love that remembering of perfection, and we don't have to make ourselves better because each moment is perfect.
It absolutely is. And when we go down to the bottom of this first lesson that we're reviewing here, it says, today's idea goes far beyond the ego's petty views of what you are and what your purpose is. As a bringer of salvation, this is obviously necessary. So, you know, once you start to accept the idea that your purpose here, your only function here is not to go out and build empires, but it's to bring forgiveness into this world. As a bringer of salvation, you are functioning on the highest level of life in this realm. And it says this is the first of a number of giant steps we will take in the next few weeks. So we're really entering into that space of re-identifying and redefining who it is that we actually are.
And I love how it says, try today to begin to build a firm foundation for these advances. You are the light of the world. God has built his plan for the salvation of his son on you. And that brings us to our next lesson, lesson 62, which is forgiveness is my function as the light of the world. Do you want to start off with this one, Chris?
Sure. This one's kind of fun because, you know, in this political year, this is a very, very powerful set of conditions that we have going on around us. And this is the key to how we respond to all this madness that appears to be real. It says, it is your forgiveness that will bring the world of darkness to the light. It is your forgiveness that lets you recognize the light in which you see. Forgiveness is a demonstration that you are the light of the world. Through your forgiveness does the truth about yourself return to your memory. Therefore, in your forgiveness lies your salvation. So we're not doing this entirely selflessly. We are doing this because we want to remember who you are. We want to reclaim that person that God created and let go of, as much as we can, that person that we have created, which is not always a good soul.
Yeah, and here it says, illusions about yourself and the world are one. And so that's a real kicker too, because oftentimes, like Carl Jung talks about, what we can't accept about ourselves within, we project outside of us. And so this really just wraps that all up into saying, whatever you're seeing out there in the world, that's it. Whatever you made out there is an illusion. That's actually something you made about yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the beauty of the Course, is it does pick up a lot of references from Jungian psychology especially, but also Freudian psychology, because it is essentially through the study, the observation, and the refinement of the mind that the change that we're all looking for is attained. And so how appropriate it was that two psychologists were the ones that the Course was manifested through, because really this is all about mind training and about recognition of the power of the mind and recognition of our identity as a part of this divine mind itself. So it really does give us a clear direction to place our attention on in constructing the world around us, or deconstructing the false world we have created.
And I love how there are so many times in the Course where they talk about how, psychologists haven't, well, it depends on if you have the version I have the sparkly version here, but it talks about how, like, a lot of psychologists don't have that full picture yet. They haven't discovered that. And then this picture, that Jesus hands us through the Course in Miracles is uniting us with that fully, like, that healed divine mind, right? Not just trying to gauge it from a human perspective.
Right. And if we go back and look at, part of the origins of Course in Miracles, you have to go back and look at Mary Baker Eddy's work when she wrote Christian Science. And she was very much aware of the power, the presence, the identity of the mind. And so she would occasionally pinpoint or highlight the idea that there are two different minds that are being interactive here. There is a false mind that we have generated. That is, she refers to it as the mortal mind. And that is the part that we have hidden from ourselves. That is, the id, if you want to go all the way back to some of the most fundamental terms in psychology. And that is the animus, the animal within us. Now the current rhetoric is the lizard brain, but in reality, it's that part of us that is disconnected from our truth and from our identity. And that animal mind, the mortal mind, will not so much die, but it will just dissolve as we surrender ourselves to our truth, which is our higher mind, the mind of God that dwells within us. So there's no war going on. There is merely a process of dissolution of a imagined part of our consciousness. And that really is how the ego is eventually transcended, is because we don't fight it down, pound it down, and crucify it. We just recognize its nothingness. and that in itself dissolves it. So it's not a journey of, huge, passionate battles, unless we're siding with the ego, and then we turn it into that. But the actual journey itself is one of peace and confidence and joy.
Yeah, like I got goosebumps when you were talking about that, because I was like seeing how it's like an absorption process, like how the spirit more is just sort of like, it's sort of like you're just being consumed by it, as you said before. And that process of the snake becoming a phoenix, is very much like that.
That's one analogy that definitely works.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, at the core, I seem to be harping on this here in the last 2 or 3 videos, but it really is that disillusion of our personal egos that we have created, and being transformed to the ego that Jesus was wearing in his material form. So that's how we access our true perfection, our Christ being, is by letting go of the personal self and allowing the Jesus self to become manifest, or become the replacement self. And then eventually even that dissolves away, because that was an ephemeral creation also.
Beautiful. So lesson 63. The light of the world brings peace to every mind through my forgiveness. And it says, how holy are you who have the power to bring peace to every mind? How blessed are you who can learn to recognize the means for letting this be done through you? What purpose could you have that would bring you greater happiness?
Well, keep going on this one too, because this is a continuance in the 2nd chapter.
You are indeed the light of the world with such a function. The Son of God looks to you for his redemption. It is yours to give him, for it belongs to you. Accept no trivial purpose or meaningless desire in its place, or you will forget your function and leave the Son of God in hell. This is no idle request that is being asked of you. You are asked to accept salvation that it may be yours to give.
And that's very, very profound when you stop and think about the debate that went on yesterday. I'm watching the fallout from that, and everybody being polarized. I hate Trump. I hate Hillary. I hate this. I hate that. So we get seduced by the politics, by the social conditions of these current times we live in. And it becomes very easy to have an unforgiving attitude toward people. But if we're really functioning on that higher level, we have started to recognize that all of this is a script. It's like a movie that we are watching. And the players are really good. They are, following the script. They're acting out all of these disastrous personalities, become invested in. And so the real challenge for the student of A Course in Miracles is to be able to walk through these environments that we have created, where hostility and anger and villainization seems to be appropriate, and to arrive at a place where there is absolute forgiveness, because you know that what you are watching, what you are observing, is not real. And that is a real serious hurdle for a lot of people, to get to that point where you see this as meaningless.
It seems to be quite a test of your conviction to be able to stand in that truth in spite of everything.
It is, and it's all a test that is created by the ego. See, this is the thing, as we move forward in our evolution back to spirit, the ego gets very, very agitated. And so we see, these circus events going on around us like this. I don't think I've ever seen such a bizarre political year. with so many twists and turns that are nonsensical, that make absolutely no sense. And it's all it's all designed to keep us engaged in the dream, in the ego's game. Because once we start to attain that sense of being at peace, once we start to step in to being that perfect example of identity that God had created, the true self, the Christ self, then it's very easy to dismiss all this. So that's why it's gotten amped up, I think, is because a lot of people are starting to challenge the ego and question the activities of the ego realm. And so the ego is turning it into this grand theater for us to keep us engaged.
Yeah, and on the surface, it seems to be quite effective, right? It looks like it's really captivating people. Just like if you go to a theater, you know, and we're all eyes on the stage, but in, you know, an ultimate sense of it, it's ineffective. It's not going to work. Like God's plan is going to persevere, and salvation is going to be that ever-present reality.
Exactly. Down toward the end of this lesson, it says, "The light of the world brings peace to every mind through my forgiveness." So every time you can step out of judgment, you are healing the world. It may not seem that way to you in the moment, but that is an actual fact. It goes on to say, "I am the means God has appointed for the salvation of the world." And that is such a huge, huge statement. You know, and then we're given some very good advice here. If you close your eyes, you will probably find it easier to let the related thoughts come to you in the minute or two that you should devote to considering this. So, you know, you can't escape the need for withdrawing from the world. That practice of meditation, that practice of prayer, that practice of stillness is an absolute necessity in order for you to fulfill your function and to get the rewards of fulfilling your function.
That actually bridges really well into the next lesson for us. Lesson 64 says, "Let me not forget my function." And it says, "Today's idea is merely another way of saying, let me not wander into temptation." I think just that part alone is pretty profound when we look at that. The lesson title is, "Let me not forget my function." In other words, let me not wander into temptation.
Right, but what is the temptation? You know, it's in the Lord's Prayer, we're utilizing those thoughts of Jesus, "Lead us not into temptation." So we're asking God to lead us in the right direction. But really the truth is that we're the ones who lead ourselves into temptation, and then God bails us out over and over again. So it's kind of funny when you stop and look at that from the physical realm and from the spiritual realm. So, yeah, it looks like the system is kind of locked up here.
Oh, there we go. Now it's back.
Yeah, that was kind of weird, but we were probably making some profoundly powerful statements here, and then the mortal mind says, "Okay, enough of this."
You want to go on with what you were saying?
Well, basically, I was just saying that, you know, the whole process that we're going through here is to recognize that God will never lead us into temptation, that we will always be led away from temptation because we're led away from the body identification. And it says, "It is the temptation to abandon God and his Son by taking on a physical appearance. It is this the body's eyes look upon." So it's very much a process of being able to withdraw your attention from the physical body, the presence of these people around you, and to be able to open yourself up to the idea that they are pure light, pure love, pure spirit. And that's probably most easily done, once again, when you close your eyes, rather than trying to bear witness to the craziness that your lower sensory perception, the eyes, will present to you. So if we can see people with vision, we see beyond the physical attributes that they may be possessing.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It actually says that here too, is that nothing the body's eyes seem to see can be anything but a form of temptation, since this was the purpose of the body itself. Yet we have learned that the Holy Spirit has another use for all the illusions you have made, and therefore he sees another purpose in them. To the Holy Spirit, the world is a place where you learn to forgive yourself what you think of as your sins. In this perception, the physical appearance of temptation becomes spiritual recognition of salvation.
So once again, we're reading a little dose of paradox here, and that's another part of the course that I love, and the spiritual journey, is that it puts a lot of illumination around the paradoxical nature of our mortal existence as compared to our, spiritual life, that we're living in a parallel time frame, even though time is the illusion that we're overcoming. Nonetheless, during all this time, we are living two lives. We are living that life that God has created for us in God, and at the same time, we're dreaming this false life that seems to be wrought with fear and pain and sorrow.
Mm-hmm. And the Holy Spirit always helps us to reframe our perception, right? To correct our perception back to God.
Exactly. And that's, again, part of the process of really training the mind, is to get to that place where we start to notice when we're off and rambling down that rocky road, and pull ourselves back into a state of awareness, and to rectify our erroneous side trips that we tend to take. So again, we see how A Course in Miracles is absolutely a process of mind training and mind control.
Absolutely. Ready for lesson 65?
Yes.
My only function is the one God gave me. The idea for today reaffirms your commitment to salvation. It also reminds you that you have no other function than this. Both of these thoughts are obviously necessary for a total commitment. Salvation cannot be the only purpose you hold while you still cherish others. The full acceptance of salvation as your only function necessarily entails two phases: the recognition of salvation as your function, and the relinquishment of all the other goals you have invented for yourself. This is the only way in which you can take your rightful place among the saviors of the world. This is the only way in which you can say and mean, my only function is the one God gave me. This is the only way in which you can find peace of mind.
Stephen, one of the things that comes up for me with this introduction of this thought is I constantly am seeing people around me who are telling me that, God told me to start a movement and to change the political face of America, or God told me to save the planet from the nasty polluters, or God told me to save the buffalo from extinction. All these different adventures that take us down that road of being consumed by what could be a very noble cause is still a divertment. It is a, directing us off into something that is an unattainable goal. You might save the buffalo this year, But, you know, that herd of buffalo that you've got salvaged 2 years from now could get hit by buffalo plague and they all die on you. So, you know, really when you look at all the material pursuits, trying to save this world, trying to fix this world, it's just a rerun over and over and over again of all the same things that are unattainable, because as soon as you fix one thing, something else falls apart. So fixing this world is not a worthy goal, but becoming the salvation of this world by redeeming not just human life, but all life through forgiveness is the real goal that has some value, that has some depth to it. And that's not always an easy thing for people to process, because they do like to get caught up in the crusades.
Mm-hmm. And so what would you say, like, exactly is entailed in that forgiveness process itself?
Well, forgiveness in its truest sense is that realization that none of this ever happened. So you cannot hold anybody accountable for anything they appear to have ever done. And that's deep water. That's a hard one for a lot of people to handle, because what you have to do is get beyond believing that this is real. You have to arrive at that point where you recognize it is in fact an illusion, because you can't forgive somebody for being a rapist. You know, I mean, that's just an unforgivable act. But once you arrive at the point where you realize that none of this is real, none of it has ever actually happened, then you're starting to allow yourself to slide into that place of realizing and releasing your animosity, your condemnation, your judgment, your hatred for the individuals who appear to be committing heinous crimes all around us. So it's definitely, you know, taking you into a much, much deeper level of looking at life, looking at the meaning of life. And it's not always an easy journey for people.
Yeah, that's a really great point, that it's not about just, you know, it's not about seeing what someone did to wrong you and then saying, well, I'm going to be a good guy and forgive them. It's more like a big picture, more of an all or nothing kind of approach of seeing the entire picture of the world as not real.
That is absolutely pure truth, Stephen. You have hit the nail squarely on the head. So
excellent.
Yes, it's not conditional. You can't do it in sections. You have to go back over and over again and include everybody and everything and every situation and nothingize it. And that is a real challenge. When you can see it as being nothing, then you are actually starting to make some serious progress in this journey that you're taking. So that is connected to that whole idea of the ego, because the more selfless we become, the less of our ego that we are entrenched in, the easier it is for us to release our fellow spiritual beings, our fellow beings of in Christ, our soulmates, I guess you could say. All of a sudden, it becomes very logical to be able to release them as well. So it really is stepping into a place of withdrawing your attachments, withdrawing your investments, withdrawing your judgments, and living at a little bit higher plateau, not in the sense of holier than thou, but getting to that higher level of looking at life through the eyes of innocence and seeing only innocence around you.
Yeah, it's like more like seeing everything as holy, because I mean, seeing the holiness within everything more so. Don't want to say that because the ego can kind of twist that up, but seeing the holiness within all.
It absolutely is there too, and that's, you know, that's another thing that is reiterated in the course on more than one occasion. The idea that the Son of God, even though he has created this hideous dream, it is acknowledged in the course that there is immense beauty also within that, and you know, and Jesus in his dialogue in the Course in Miracles tells us that even though we're dreaming the flawed dream, there is a part of us that still can only create love and beauty and grace and truth. So then it becomes a process of observation where we can begin to see what is actually going on, and we can actually witness the beauty in the world that surrounds us and discard the flaws that the ego has constructed around that inherent beauty.
Absolutely beautiful. Do you want to move on to 66 now?
Yeah.
And it says, my happiness and my function are one. I love this one. It's so simple.
It absolutely is, yes.
And it says, you have surely noticed an emphasis throughout our recent lessons on the connection between fulfilling your function and achieving happiness. This is because you do not really see the connection. Yet there is more than just a connection between them. They are the same. Their forms are different, but their content is completely one.
And that is pretty much the core of what it is that we're all, in fact, seeking. You know, we're always seeking happiness. And if we're listening to our ego is saying, well, I'll be happy if I can get that new Mercedes, and then I'll be happy if I can get that house with a swimming pool, and it just goes on and on and on. Well, happiness does not come from consumption. That is a very, very, very hard lesson for the ego mind to accommodate. And we really have to lift ourselves up into our spiritual consciousness in order to recognize that consumption has nothing to do with happiness. It's just another way of diverting us from finding our own personal truth. So in order for us to attain happiness, then we have to be in that constant state of forgiving, releasing, and healing. And once you start actually doing that, you will notice that your overall sense of wellness and happiness all of a sudden gets amped up. And you do actually end up falling into a space of being happy for no real reason. You know, it's like normally we condition ourselves with, I'm happy because this happened or because that happened. But then all of a sudden, if you're living the way you're supposed to be living, you'll begin to notice that happiness is just a state that you step into, and it's just with you. It's there all the time.
Yeah, and one could even say that that's really the only authentic form of happiness, because any other form of happiness that's tied to something could be taken from you. It could wear away, it could leave. And so that couldn't be a genuine sense of happiness.
Absolutely, yes. So, and this one's got some, some good thoughts for the reviews throughout the day, using the practice periods here. It says, God gives me only happiness. So, and the ego will probably give you only frustration. He has given my function to me. So once again, we're recognizing that we're on a mission from God, as
the Blues Brothers.
Yes, as overused as that statement is. And then it goes on the final statement, therefore my function must be happiness. So really putting two and two together and coming up with a solid outcome here that is inspiring, that is a source of, let's go for this, let's do this.
And that's, I feel like, the part where you could, like a 2-year-old could teach this, because like it's not like you don't need to understand this world. All you have to understand is that God created you to be happy.
Yeah, and I think that if parents would start using that theme in their parenting, we would see a whole generation of kids coming along that that are profoundly and astonishingly transformative to this realm that we're living in, because it would eliminate a lot of those misconceptions about life. So yeah, parenting can definitely take A Course in Miracles and that are Buddhas, that are Jesus, walking around all over the place. Imagine having a population of 150 million Jesuses walking on the earth at one particular time. That could be pretty amazing.
Absolutely. And really kind of feels like you just have to let them be, really. You don't, just as long as we don't program kids to think otherwise, to dissociate, then that's naturally how they come in, I believe.
That's very true. Yeah, we do have to pull them back every once in a while from getting egocentric, and you have discussions with them about, is this something that you want, or is this something that the ego wants you to have? Because really we it's not a process of putting an indelible stamp on them, but it is a process of giving them resources to work with, where they're able to exercise discernment on their own.
Yeah, and just to close up this lesson, it says, my happiness and function are one because God has given me both.
That's beautiful.
And we go to our final lesson, right? Lesson 67.
That is it.
Love created me like itself. Today's idea is a complete and accurate statement of what you are. This is why you are the light of the world. This is why God appointed you as the world's savior. This is why the Son of God looks to you for his salvation. He is saved by what you are. Anything to add to that, Chris?
Well, I think that the beauty of this is, once again, not attacking the ego, but demolishing the ego just by stating truth. And that's what the Course does over and over again. And when you are confronted with the truth, the ego just kind of dissolves right in front of you. Willie Williams, that French performer, has an incredibly good video on YouTube called Ego. And if you go and check that video out, you'll get kind of a chuckle out of it, because when he's doing this dance thing, he's got smoke and mirrors, and that really is what the ego is in its truest sense. All illusion, no substance. And here, by just making one simple statement, it does essentially the same thing. It completely and totally demolishes the ego by saying that you were created by God in God's image and likeness. So you are exactly what God is. And all the attributes that we give to God, God is love, God is life, God is light, all of those attributes are a part of you also.
And it even says here, holiness created me whole, kindness created me kind, helpfulness created me helpful, perfection created me perfect. Any attribute which is in accord with God as he defines himself is appropriate for use.
Yeah, and then the next statement after that is really powerful. We are trying today to undo your definition of God and replace it with his own. So in a lot of ways, you're taking a lot of where God shows up as wrathful and is pissed off and is smiting people down. You're taking all that stuff out of the descriptive passages about God. You're eliminating that and allowing God, as interpreted by Buddha, as interpreted by Jesus, as interpreted by a multitude of different spiritual masters, to be redefined as love and light and harmony and beauty and peace and joy. And so those are the conditions that exist within you and that you exist within.
Yeah, absolutely. We are also trying to emphasize that you are a part of his definition of himself. Like, just going back to your source, you know, it's like I don't have any attributes of myself. I am created by God. So I can only have the attributes that he's given to me.
Exactly. And that's why, since we know that we have all the attributes of God, and one of the most powerful meditations you can work with is that simple thought of, Lord, reveal thyself to me. Because if God reveals itself to you, then you know who you are and what you are.
Absolutely. So was there anything more we could add about all these lessons before we close off for next week?
Well, I think we probably went through these lessons in a very concise way. I think that if anybody has any questions, please do shoot us emails and, leave remarks on our Facebook page or our YouTube page, because we do want to address anybody's questions as we're going through the lessons.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, feel free to reach out, and feel free to share this video as well. We're just going to go ahead and keep going with these. It's a really great review for me, and hopefully for everyone who's a part of it, to go over these just every week. It's a good reminder.
Absolutely. And I think that, our discussions enhance my existence so much. And I think that we have to recognize, whenever we join together in communion, in communication about the Course, it really takes us to a higher plateau. So
yeah,
it's a good way to give yourself a little extra juice to get through the day.
Absolutely. It's just such a great reminder to come back to that sense of truth inside too.
You bet. Well, Stephen, I will talk to you in 1 week, if not earlier.
Okay, that sounds great, Chris. I'll talk to you in a week from today.
Great. And keep the bunnies warm and happy.
We will. All right. Enjoy.